If you win, the table will honor its word. You will have your freedom. But you won't take it. I want you to find your peace with a good death.
Released in the year 2023. The film starts in New York City, where John Wick and his pit bull have taken refuge with the Bowery King.
Abandon all hope, you who are about to enter here!
And Bowery King comes in to ask him if he's ready to go after the High Table. John simply says, yeah. John travels to Morocco, where he chases men working for the Elder on horseback. The Elder is watching them from a distance. After killing those men, John confronts the Elder for his ring, though John is told that the ring is gone. The Elder tells John that he will only find peace when he is dead. John then proceeds to execute the Elder by shooting him twice before departing. Back in New York, Winston and Sharon are summoned by the Harbinger to meet the Marquis de Gramont, who was sent by the High Table. They give Winston an hourglass, and he has to meet Marquis de Gramont before the sand in the hourglass goes to the other side completely. They have learned of the Elder's execution, and the Marquis berates Winston for failing to kill John. As they're talking, an hourglass similar to the one sent to Winston by the Marquis is placed on his table. The sand moves completely from one side to another. As a result, the Marquis has the New York Continental condemned and blown up. Winston is deemed excommunicated, and to rub it in deeper, the Marquis shoots Sharon in the chest. This is very sad for Winston, as Sharon has stood with him for a long while. Winston stays by his friend's side as he dies, saying it should have been him. In Paris, a blind assassin named Cain is standing in the park as his daughter Mia is playing the violin in the park. Cain is called upon by the Marquis to go after John. Cain says he's retired, but the Marquis threatens Mia's life if Cain refuses the orders of the High Table. Cain is blind, but is a great assassin. He is highly skilled, and he's considered as one of the greatest assassins. Cain has also had close ties with John in the past. They both were good friends. Meanwhile, John heads to the Osaka Continental, managed by his old friend Shimazu Koji, where his daughter Akira is his concierge. Akira does not like the fact that her father was still helping John, which meant to betray the High Table. They were already aware of what had happened to the Continental in New York, as Winston had failed in killing John. Koji meets with John on the roof, agreeing to give him sanctuary in secret, although Akira also comes to the roof to talk to her father and finds John there. She doesn't trust John to be there. Soon the Marquis' right-hand man, Chidi, arrives at the Osaka Continental. They ask the manager to surrender John to them. Koji tells them that John is not there. Chidi does not believe him, and with his hit squad attempts to lure John out. Koji's own men show up and face off against the High Table assassins by firing arrows in the darkness. A huge fight begins, with dozens of men getting injured and killed in the process. When the hitmen make it to the roof, John grabs his gun and starts to do what he does best. While Koji's guards are able to fight off most of the High Table hitmen, Cain arrives and begins his own body count, setting up traps to help him hear where his targets are moving before using his sword and gun to kill the men. Meanwhile, Akira joins the fight and executes some of Chidi's men, but she ends up getting shot and wounded. John helps her, and Koji gets out while he continues to fight more men, including taking out several with a pair of nunchucks. He's found by Cain. The two of them view each other as former friends, so Cain is reluctant to go after John, but does so for the sake of Mia, his daughter. John and Cain briefly fight before John manages to get away. In the middle of the gunfights, a tracker, Mr. Nobody, and his German shepherd are nearby, and he kills some of the gunmen going after John. He wants the contract on John's head too, but he claims that the current hit, $20 million, is not enough. So he's currently helping John, and he wants to wait before killing him so that he gets the price he wants. As Koji and Akira are running out, they encounter Cain. He and Koji are also good friends from their past. They ask each other how they've been and how their daughters were. Koji refuses to allow Cain to go after John, so they engage in a sword duel. When it appears Cain does not want to kill Koji, so he allows him to walk away as he's seriously injured. Koji keeps up the fight until Cain delivers a fatal blow. Akira holds her father's body as he dies, and attempts to grab his sword to kill Cain, but he advises her against it, so that she does not suffer the same fate as her father, and he tells her he will see her again. Also, he asks her to take care of herself. Akira goes to the train station where she finds John, blaming him for her father's death. She tells him to kill Cain, or she will avenge her father herself. Winston meets with Bowery King, as they both know them still being close to John makes them targets. After what the High Table has done to Winston, he wants the same as the Bowery King. They both want to take on the High Table with the help of John Wick. Meanwhile, the Harbinger talks to the Marquis over the unnecessary bloodshed at the Osaka Continental. But the Marquis says it is necessary to not only kill John Wick, but to destroy the idea of him as an untouchable and unkillable figure. He wants the legacy of the Boogeyman to vanish from existence. He thinks that John is overrated, and thinks that an example should be set. The Marquis thinks that John Wick will easily be dealt with. The Marquis is then visited by Mr. Nobody, who demands a $23 million contract for killing John. The Marquis responds by impaling his hand and forcing him to choose either to pull the knife out or pull his hand out to see where his ambitions lie. Mr. Nobody pulls his hand out, cutting between his fingers, and the Marquis agrees to honor his request. He agrees with him for a $23 million contract if he can kill John. John meets Winston at Chiron's tomb, offering his condolences for the loss of his friend. Winston wants to get back at the Marquis, so he tells John that in order to win his freedom from the High Table, he must challenge the Marquis to a duel, even though it is believed that High Table duels were only myths. The only people who can support John in his endeavor are his family. But the Ruska Roma tore his ticket and severed ties with him. Seeing no other way, John agrees to seek them out and ask for their help. Despite the fact that they hate John now, John has no other way to get his freedom from the High Table. If John is able to kill the Marquis in the duel, then Winston will also succeed in taking his revenge. John travels to the Ruska Roma in Berlin, where he is greeted with a shotgun blast by the priest before he is tied up with a noose around his neck. He is met by his adoptive sister, Katya, who is angry with John because his killing of the elder led the Marquis to order the execution of her father, Pyotr, who would have approved of John in the duel. John offers to help Katya to redeem himself, and she orders him to go after a German High Table member named Killa, the man who killed her father and had taken over most of their territory as well. John goes to Killa's nightclub, which is heavily secured by armed men. Kane and Mr. Nobody are also there after tracking John down. Killa asks Kane and Nobody that they want to kill John, and he says that he also wants to kill John, but John wants to kill Killa. Killa says that the issue can easily be solved by playing a game of cards. The three sit for a card game with Killa, where Killa cheats before having his men go after the three assassins. While Kane and Nobody hold their own against the thugs, along with Nobody's dog, John goes after Killa throughout the club in the midst of oblivious clubgoers. John slices Killa's neck with a card and fights him, though Killa uses his strength and weight against John. Killa's men go after John and meet predictably bloody ends. Killa pushes John over a balcony, but it is not enough to stop him. John eventually corners Killa and knocks him over a stairway, sending him falling until he smashes headfirst onto the ground, killing him. John then takes one of Killa's gold teeth as proof of his death, then goes back to Ruska Roma and gives the gold teeth to Katya as proof of Killa's death. Katya reacts approvingly and agrees to keep her side of the bargain. She helps John undergo the ceremony where he is branded with the family's crest and given support for the duel. Winston visits the Marquis with the official challenge document from John for the duel. The Marquis thinks that the High Table duel is just a myth, and he's reluctant towards the challenge. Despite the Marquis trying to refuse, Winston reminds him that he is still bound to the High Table and its customs, so he must go through with it. In addition, Winston demands that if John wins, Winston will no longer be excommunicado, and his Continental will be uncondemned and rebuilt, as it were, with his management reinstated. However, the Marquis reminds Winston that he will be John's second, so if John dies, so will he. Winston agrees with him. John arrives to sit down with the Marquis, as the Harbinger presides over them to discuss the conditions of the duel. The Marquis gets to decide the location of the duel. They will meet at the Sacré-Cœur in Paris at sunrise, while John gets to decide the weapon of the duel, and they will duel with guns. If either of them fails to show up before the deadline, it will be an automatic forfeiture and grounds for execution. Kane will be the Marquis' second, and he agrees to allow him and his daughter free if he can kill John. John goes to a church where he sits to pay tribute to Helen. Kane meets him there in a friendly manner, telling him about Mia. He tells him that the Marquis has his daughter and what he has to lose if he does not agree with the Marquis. John later meets with Winston and Bowery King, the latter giving him a new gun and one of the latest bulletproof suits. The Harbinger reminds the Marquis of what would happen within the High Table if he were killed by John. To ensure that John does not make it to the Sacré-Cœur on time, the Marquis deploys Chidi and his thugs to go after him. him. A radio DJ also announces to other listening assassins that the bounty on John is set for anyone who can kill him before sunrise. Now everyone is after John. The Bowery King and Winston take John on a boat in the sewers and leave him as close as they can to his destination. From here onwards, John is on his own. He must walk by foot towards the Sacre-Cœur. As John makes his way to the Sacre-Cœur, scores of assassins go after him. He faces off against gunmen in the streets, even getting into the traffic around the Arc de Triomphe, shooting the bad guys or letting them get hit by cars. The High Table keeps track of his whereabouts, leading to more assassins going after him. John enters a warehouse full of bad guys and fires explosive rounds at them. At the same time, nobody helps take out some of the assassins and contacts the Marquis, demanding a higher payment. The Marquis ultimately agrees to a $40 million contract, luring out more desperate and doomed hitmen. John finally makes it to the steps leading up to the Sacre-Cœur, killing several more assassins as he climbs up the steps, before Chidi shows up and knocks him all the way back down the steps. By this time, John is really tired, and there's very little time for him to reach the Sacre-Cœur. Now Kane shows up at the bottom of the steps to help John get to the top. Kane and John kill Chidi's guys. They slowly make their way up to the steps, and on their way, they leave dozens of dead bodies. Nobody arrives as well, fighting Chidi because he threw his dog into traffic. But the dog is okay. With John's help, Chidi is brought down. The dog bites him in the balls, and nobody puts a bullet in his head. For good measure, the dog also pees on Chidi's face. Winston, the Marquis, and Harbinger are waiting for John at Sacre-Cœur. As they wait, they hear the gunfires and the noises from the fight going on the steps. John makes it mere moments before the sun rises. He and Kane grab their pistols as they engage in an old-fashioned duel. Both manage to hit each other twice. In the third round, Kane shoots John in the gut, but John doesn't fire. The Marquis then orders that he claim the coup de grace, so that he may be the one to kill John Wick. He grabs Kane's gun and aims for John before Winston tells him he's an arrogant asshole, and reminds him John didn't fire his last round. The Marquis realizes this too late before John shoots and kills him. The Harbinger then declares that both John and Kane are free from their obligations to the High Table. John goes back down the steps and briefly thinks about Helen, saying her name before he slumps over. John Wick dies as a free man. Winston and Bowery King bury John next to Helen, with his tombstone reading, "Loving Husband." Bowery King asks Winston if he thinks John is in heaven or hell, to which Winston replies, "Who knows?" The two walk away, with Bowery King continuing to look after John's dog. In a post-credits scene, Kane returns to Paris to reunite with his daughter, but is approached by the vengeful Akira, who brandishes a knife. Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on the notification and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.